My name is Samantha, and I have always been a responsible person. I grew up in a modest suburban house with my younger sister Mia, who, unlike me, has been accustomed since childhood to the fact that life is strewn with privileges and gifts, while I had to earn everything on my own. I realized early on that no one would give me anything on a silver platter, that any desire or goal requires effort, and that even in my own family I would have to fight for the right to equal treatment. While Mia was carelessly getting new clothes, fancy gadgets, and money for entertainment, I was wearing clothes after my cousins and working part-time in high school to afford something new. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy! I remember when we were teenagers, Mia managed to crash our father's car while riding bicycles with friends. But instead of punishing her, or at least making her take responsibility for what she had done, her parents did something else. They simply paid for her driving lessons and soon bought a used car so that she would no longer be tempted to borrow Dad's car without permission. That was the first time I felt how different the attitude towards two children in the same family can be. When I asked why I still didn't have a car, despite the fact that I was studying for A's and working 2 jobs, my father just shrugged and replied in that tone that brooked no objections. "Mia needs more support to stay on the right track. You're doing fine as it is." There was another case when, on the eve of the prom, Mia rented my dress without even asking, ruined it by accidentally spilling red wine, and my parents sided with her again, telling me to be understanding. Of course, they gave me money for an urgent replacement of the dress, but later they forced me to return the entire amount, despite the fact that I never allowed myself such antics. I used to rely only on myself and ended up graduating from college on my own, without anyone's financial help, while Mia dropped out after the first semester, saying it was none of her business. I found a job at a good marketing firm, rented a decent apartment, and eventually met Derek, a man I felt safe with and who supported me in everything. Derek and I had been together for 2 years when Mia got a phone call. She was crying, complaining that she had lost her job again. Her voice was shaking. She was sobbing into the phone, and through her sobs I could only make out fragments of phrases. I was fired. It's not my fault. The phone, the bus, the boss is full. I took a deep breath, knowing that the real reason most likely lay not in external circumstances, but in her own irresponsibility. But at the same time, I understood that, no matter what, she remains my sister. "What do you want?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. "Can I stay with you for a while?" Mia sighed, and as if justifying herself in advance, hurriedly added, "I just won't find another job until then. My landlord kicks me out at the end of the week." I looked around our small but cozy apartment that Derek and I shared. We didn't have a separate guest room, but we did have a pull-out sofa in the living room. "Let me talk to Derek," I said, knowing full well that he wouldn't be thrilled with the idea. And so it turned out. Derek greeted my words with displeasure, reminding me that he had only seen Mia a few times, but he had already formed an opinion about her. She was selfish, spoiled, and not used to taking responsibility. "It's just for a few weeks," I promised. "She just needs help getting back on her feet." So 2 months ago, Mia moved in with her 2 suitcases, and, as it turned out, with endless drama. On the very first day, she spread her things all over the living room, occupied a shelf in the bathroom with my expensive cosmetics, and then, instead of immediately starting to look for a job, she spent her days scrolling through social networks on her phone. "I'm exploring the possibilities," she said when I once again entered the apartment and saw her in her pajamas in front of the TV at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Derek tried not to express his annoyance, but I could tell by the way his lips pressed into a thin line and tense wrinkles appeared on his forehead whenever he found Mia in the living room, idly flipping through pages with photos and videos. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I had an important meeting scheduled with a client at 2 p.m., and I was carefully preparing for it. However, around noon, I felt a migraine coming. My vision blurred, there was a sharp pain in my temples, and nausea rolled up my throat. I took a pill, but the relief never came. After assessing my condition, I decided to warn my boss and reschedule the meeting in order to go home and relax. Fortunately, she was understanding. "Okay, Samantha, we'll reschedule the meeting with Roberts for Thursday." Exhaling with relief, I closed my laptop, packed my bag, and headed home, anticipating the silence, the opportunity to lie down in a dark room and at least pass out for a few hours. However, as soon as I opened the apartment door, I realized that I was only dreaming of peace. I froze, clutching the phone as if it could give me a foothold in this whirlwind of absurdity that had just hit me, turning my whole life upside down, and to which my own mother contributed with a kind of icy indifference that sent chills through my skin. Are you serious?" I asked, feeling my voice tremble, but not from tears, but from rage, from the pain that tore me from the inside out, forcing my whole being to protest against what I had just heard. "Of course I'm serious," Mom snapped. There wasn't a shadow of doubt in her voice, just annoyance, as if I'd caused a completely unnecessary drama out of nowhere. "Samantha, you're an adult. You have a stable job. You can afford a new apartment, and Mia is having a hard time right now. She loves him, and you can't just throw her out on the street like an unnecessary thing." "She doesn't just love him, Mom," I snapped, jumping to my feet, feeling everything inside boiling with injustice. "She slept with him behind my back, in my bed. How can you even justify that?" "Don't be so selfish," Mom huffed irritably. "Sometimes things happen in life that we don't like, but we need to be able to let go. It's just a man, Samantha. You'll find someone else. Mia's always had a harder time with men than you do. You know how unlucky she was in a relationship. Why can't you just be a little generous?" "Generosity," I repeated, feeling my stomach clench with pain, but I won't let those tears get the better of me again. No, not now. "Generosity is when you forgive a friend for an accidental mistake, not when you let your sister ruin your relationship, and then you give her an apartment so she can safely continue her affair with your ex. Stop acting like a moody child." My mother's voice became firmer, colder, and something inside me seemed to snap. Life is arranged in such a way that not everything always goes according to plan. Derek didn't love you, so if that's what happened, accept it. But he loves Mia, and I won't let you ruin her happiness because of your selfishness. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to calm my racing pulse, and only now realized that I was trembling. My own body couldn't take the blow, the betrayal that came not only from Derek and Mia, but now from my mother as well. "I can't believe," I mouthed, feeling my knees go weak. "Enough of this drama, Samantha." Mom sighed wearily. "You've always been reasonable. You've always known what was right and what wasn't. So accept the situation for what it is, and don't make life difficult for yourself and others." "No, Mom," I said softly but firmly. "Now I see who is who. And you know what? You've probably always treated me like this. I was just too blind to notice." "What do you mean?" She was wary, but there was no alarm in her voice. There was no fear of losing me, only annoyance, as if I were an obnoxious child who did not want to obey in any way. I breathed, feeling a cold, searing clarity finally settle inside, that you no longer exist for me. Not you, not Mia. You've both betrayed me, and I won't let you take advantage of my kindness anymore." "Samantha, don't you dare say that." I heard a note of displeasure in my mother's voice, but I didn't care anymore. "Good night, Mom," I said, and dropped the call. I dropped the phone on the sofa and, overcome by sudden weakness, slowly sank to the floor, leaning back against the sofa. The silence of the apartment was so deafening that my ears hurt. I suddenly realized that this was the first time in many years that Mia and Derek, their voices, their presence, and their dramas were not in this silence. I'm alone, but it's probably a good thing. I took a deep breath, feeling the pain in my chest ease a little, as instead of chaos in my thoughts, calmness finally comes, albeit strange, even if it was alien to me until now. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how to live after all this. But I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let anyone treat me like I was nothing anymore. I remember how his hands slid down my back, slowly, with a kind of almost sacred care, as if he was afraid to scare off this moment, as if he doubted that this was really happening. I remember how my body, tense from all the events I had experienced, relaxed under his touch for the first time in a long time, as all the pain, all the anger, all the resentment that had accumulated in me over the past weeks suddenly began to melt, giving way to something new, disturbing, but at the same time, so right. His lips, hesitant at first, soft as if trying, became demanding and insistent after a moment, and I responded to him with the same fervor, with a kind of greed unexpected for myself, as if I wanted to make up for all the lost years, all the moments when we could have been here, but were not, when I blindly held on to the illusion of love with a man who was never worth me. We didn't talk because words were superfluous. They would only ruin this moment, bring us back to reality, and reality was the last thing I wanted right now. I longed to forget myself, to lose myself in this new feeling, in the warmth of his touch, in intimacy, which suddenly seemed to me the most natural thing in the world. I remember how his fingers buried themselves in my hair, how he pulled back slightly, peering into my face, as if giving me a chance to change my mind, as if asking without words. "Are you sure?" I answered without making a sound, just pulling him to me and biting into his lips again. The night seemed to stretch into eternity, filled only with our breathing, random laughs, inarticulate whispers, echoes of passion that finally found a way out after so many years of restraint. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how either of us would react this morning, but at that moment, I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself not to think about tomorrow. When I woke up, the soft morning light was filtering through the thin curtains, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. I felt strong arms hugging me tightly, and without opening my eyes, I realized that everything that had happened last night was real. Not a drunken dream. I slowly turned my head and saw Zach, who was already awake and looking at me with a slight smile, as if studying me, as if trying to figure out if I was sorry. "Good morning." His voice was slightly hoarse, warm, almost affectionate. I didn't know what to say, because I wasn't sure how I felt. I just smiled back. In the next few weeks, my life changed, as if someone had switched it to a different, brighter, and more intense mode. Work now occupied me completely, and I enjoyed every second I spent in the office, every new challenge, every project that allowed me to prove to myself that I deserved more. Zach became my closest person, but we didn't talk about what had changed between us. We just spent more time together, having lunch, walking around the city after work, sitting in cafes, discussing everything in the world, laughing at old jokes that only we knew. He didn't push me. He didn't ask me what I wanted. He didn't force me to decide what was going on between us. And for that, I was grateful to him. But one day, when we were sitting in a small wine bar, sipping red wine and watching the first snow slowly falling outside the window, he suddenly said softly, I could get used to this." I turned my head to him, peering into his face, trying to figure out exactly what he meant. "For what?" I asked, taking a sip of wine. "The fact that you're here." He shrugged slightly, as if it was something self-evident. "The fact that you smile when you look at me. To the fact that we're sitting and talking like this, and I don't have to pretend that I don't want to touch your hand." I held my breath because his words hit home. "Zach," I began, but he gently interrupted me. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. Just know that I'm here, and I'm not going to disappear." I nodded because I couldn't say anything clear. I didn't know what I wanted, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to find out. I clutched the phone in my hand, feeling a long-forgotten, dull irritation rise up inside me, mixed with bitterness, with resentment that I no longer wanted to feel, but which seemed to settle in me forever as soon as my mother invaded my life again. "Family?" I repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it, feeling it turn inside out, acquiring a completely different meaning, not warm and familiar, but cold, filled with an empty sound. "Are you talking about family?" About the same family that sided with my sister after she ruined my relationship? About the family that made me feel like a stranger, unwanted, thrown on the sidelines? About a family that didn't even try to understand me, but simply decided that I had to accept betrayal and pretend that nothing had happened? There was a short, ragged intake of breath on the other end of the line. Samantha. Mom tried to make her voice stern, but it betrayed her nervousness. It was a long time ago, and you should have already left it in the past. Leave it in the past? I smiled bitterly. This past still reminds of itself. Every time I hear distant news about Mia and Derek, every time I think about how you calmly accepted them as if nothing had happened. You know, Mom, I've been wondering for a long time, why did you justify it so easily? Why are her feelings more important to you than mine? Because you're strong, Samantha. She sounded annoyed, as if I were a naughty child who didn't want to understand the simple truth. You've always handled everything on your own, Mia. She's not like that. She needs support, and you've always been independent, could you? Could you stand it? I interrupted her, not hiding my sarcasm. Could I close my eyes over and over again, let you step on my throat, erase my feelings into powder for the sake of someone's convenience? You're making things difficult, she sighed. We're still your family, despite all this. No, Mom. This time I said it calmly, almost wearily, but with complete confidence. You were my family, but now it's not. There was a long, oppressive silence, filled with unspoken words, and I knew she was waiting for something from me. Maybe a concession, maybe remorse. But I was no longer the kind of Samantha who was ready to accept. I just don't understand how you could, she finally said. You got engaged and didn't even invite us. Yes, Mother, exactly. We're your family, Samantha. No, Mom, my family is Zach and the people who really love me, not taking advantage of me. I felt calmness finally return inside as I said it, and with each word the weight that weighed on my shoulders became lighter. She hesitated for a moment. I was just hoping that one day you would grow up and realize that resentment is not what life is built on. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to savor this last moment of our conversation, this final chord that I knew would put an end to our story. You're right, Mom, I said softly. Life is not built on resentment, but it's not based on betrayal either. And before she could say anything else, I hit the end button. I stared at them, feeling rage slowly but inexorably boiling up inside, mixed with fatigue. Oh my God, really again? After all these months, after everything that had happened, did they really think that I should leave my business and rush over at the first call to comfort Mia, who herself had never cared about my feelings? Are you serious? My voice sounded even surprisingly calm, considering that I could barely contain the urge to turn around and leave. You made me think that one of you was dying, but in reality, it was just Mia who was back in the drama she created. Samantha, don't be so callous. Mom clenched her hands and shook her head, as if I were a moody child who didn't understand the obvious things. She's lost the love of her life. Has she lost the love of her life? I repeated it slowly, giving myself time to realize the absurdity of what was happening. The love of my life that you stole from me? Mia sobbed louder, burying her face in her hands, but I no longer had any sympathy. I looked at her and didn't see the person who used to be my sister. I saw a woman who was used to getting everything she wanted and was completely unable to cope with the consequences of her actions. I do not know what to do, she moaned without lifting her head. Is that so? I crossed my arms over my chest. Have you ever asked yourself how I felt when I found myself in exactly the same situation? She looked up at me, tearful, pleading, but they had no power over me anymore. I know I hurt you, Samantha, but please don't turn your back on me now. I looked at my mom, then at my dad, who was sitting with his lips pressed tightly together, with an expression on his face as if he would rather be anywhere but here. And you really think I should be here for her? That I have to drop everything and rush to help? She's your sister, my father said calmly. She was my sister before, but that didn't stop her. I shook my head, realizing that this was really the end, that I no longer feel attached, that the pain that burned me before has turned into emptiness. Mom folded her arms across her chest and looked at me reproachfully. Are you really ready to give up your family because of some man? Because of some man? I felt my lips twitch in a sarcastic smile. No, Mom, I'm not giving up on you because of Derek, but because you've never been a family to me. You've always been Mia's family, and I've just been there for you. It's not fair, my father said softly. No, Dad, I stared at him. It's unfair when you spend your whole life trying, enduring, giving in, and as a result, you're left alone because those you thought were close to you always chose you. Mia burst into tears and Mom immediately hugged her, giving me a disapproving look, but I didn't care anymore. Go away if that's what you want, she said icily. Just don't come back when you need a family. I nodded. I'm not coming back, Mom. You've made it too clear to me that you've never needed me. I turned around and left the house, feeling as if with every step it was getting easier to breathe, as if the heaviness that I had been carrying for so many years was leaving my chest. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove out of the driveway without even looking back. The past is behind us, and I was ready to move on. I stared at the phone screen in disbelief. Inside, deep down, I probably should have expected something like this, but even after everything that happened, after all the humiliation and betrayal, the thought that my own mother could so calmly, so busily bill me for Mia's baby, as if it were utilities or a loan payment, which caused me to feel something between rage and hysterical laughter. Zach was silent, holding the phone in front of him and skimming through the list, his jaw tensing with each item, and his fingers turning white from how tightly he gripped the device. I could see the anger rising inside him, and I knew that if I didn't stop it now, he would pick up the phone and call my mother to tell her everything he thought of her. But I didn't want him to do it. I wanted to say it myself. Are you going to answer them? What is it? He finally asked, handing the phone back to me. I looked at him, feeling a dry, bitter smile slowly spread across my lips. Oh, yes, I nodded slowly. Yes, I'm going to. I dialed my mother's number, and as expected, she answered immediately, as if she had been waiting for my call. Finally, she breathed irritably. I thought I'd have to write to you again. Have you transferred the money yet? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't help the sarcastic chuckle that escaped my lips. Do you even hear yourself, Mom? I asked calmly. What are you talking about? She frowned. You literally billed me for Mia's baby, I continued, enjoying the silence on the other end of the line, where I could sense her confusion. Do you seriously think that I have to pay $20,000 because your beloved daughter stole my boyfriend, got pregnant by him, and he left her? Samantha, don't be so dramatic, she said irritably. We are a family, and the family helps each other in difficult times. You're right, the family helps. I nodded, even knowing she couldn't see it. But your family has never helped me. It's not fair, Mom sighed. We always supported you until you started acting like you didn't need anyone. Did you support me? I laughed mirthlessly. At the moment when I needed your support the most, you just chose Mia. You didn't even try to understand me. You didn't give me the right to be angry, to be offended, to have at least some emotions. You just wrote me off as an unnecessary detail because it was more convenient for you to maintain it. Samantha, I don't want to argue about this again, Mom said wearily. The question is not in the past. The question is in the future. Your niece or nephew should not suffer because of the mistakes of adults. You know what, Mom? I felt something snap inside me, as if an invisible weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. You're right. Children should not suffer. But here's the problem. This is not my child. But you're her sister. No, Mom, I was her sister, and now I'm just a man who doesn't owe her or you anything. She sighed, and then there was anger in her voice. So you're refusing to help your family? Yes, I said simply. I refuse. Then don't you dare ask us for help anymore, Samantha. Her voice turned icy. We'll erase you as if you never existed. I chuckled. Oh, Mom, I shook my head. You did it a long time ago. I dropped the call and immediately blocked her number. Zach looked at me intently, studying my face, and finally said softly, Are you okay? I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, then opened them again and looked at him. Yes, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I really thought so. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the irritation that instantly flared up in me as soon as I saw the familiar silhouettes outside the door. Of course they came. Of course, they didn't care enough about the drama they'd created, the gossip they'd spread over the past few weeks, or the attempts to make me look like a monster in front of everyone who knew us. No, now they decided to come in person, because apparently they were sure that if they just told me everything to my face, if they begged, pressed, manipulated, threatened, then I would break down, as I always did when I was younger. But I was different now. Zach squeezed my hand in quiet support, and I nodded, letting him know that everything was fine. I'll be fine, I repeated, assuring not only him but myself as well. I turned the lock and opened the door, trying to look as calm as possible, despite the fact that everything inside me was boiling. Mom stood first, her face tense, but not angry, rather expectant, like a person who is trying to determine which tactics to choose. My father was standing next to me, arms crossed over his chest, and his expression was stony. But Mia looked exhausted. Her face was pale, her eyes were puffy, and her lips were pressed tightly together, as if she was fighting the urge to cry right here and now. Samantha, Mom spoke first, and I immediately realized that she had chosen a tone of humility because she realized that a frontal attack would no longer work. We just want to talk, I asked coldly, not moving from my place. About the family, my father said softly, and for the first time in a long time, there was no condemnation in his voice, no condescension, only weariness. I rolled my eyes. If you're going to tell me again that a family should support each other no matter what, then you can turn around and leave. For God's sake, Samantha, Mom flared up. That's not why we're here. Then why? I crossed my arms over my chest. Mia took a step forward, her hands trembling, and I was surprised to realize that this was the first time I'd seen her truly vulnerable, without a drop of that arrogant confidence that had always surrounded her. Samantha. Her voice was thin, weak, completely unlike the moody, manipulative tone she always used. I know what I've done. I know I betrayed you, and I'm not asking you to forgive me because I don't deserve it, but... She swallowed. I'm scared. I didn't answer, just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. Derek dumped me as soon as he found out I was pregnant. Her voice cracked, and tears glistened in her eyes. I really thought he loved me, that he's not like that. I chuckled, shaking my head. You thought he wasn't like that because it was convenient for you to think that way. She jerked her head up, her lips twitched, but she couldn't find anything to say. You knew he was capable of betrayal, I continued. You knew because you were a part of that betrayal. She lowered her head, her shoulders were shaking. I'm not making excuses for myself, she whispered. I do not know what to do. And now you've come to me? I narrowed my eyes. Why? Because I have no one else to go to. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw in her eyes not only fear, but also real remorse. You know I don't believe you, right? I cocked my head to the side. You've been lying to me all your life, using me as you pleased, and now that you need something again, do you want me to believe you? I don't want anything from you except a chance to say I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. I was silent, considering her words, then slowly exhaled. I'm sorry you're hurting, Mia, I finally said. Really, but I can't be the one to save you. She nodded, but tears were streaming down her face. I understand, she said softly. I just wanted you to know. Mom jumped up, clearly unhappy with this turn of events. Samantha, you can't just... I can, I said firmly, and I made my choice. My father put his hand on my mother's shoulder, stopping her. Let's go, he said softly. We did what we could. Mia looked at me once more. Her lips were trembling, and there was so much pain in her eyes that for a moment I felt a little regret. But only for a moment. They turned around and left. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and turned to Zach. Are you okay? What is it? He asked softly. I nodded. Yes, I said, And for the first time in my life, it was true. The day I closed the door in front of them, I finally realized that I would never let them manipulate me again. I would never feel obligated to those who never put me first. Their last words, their threats, their contemptuous looks, all this no longer had power over me, no longer corroded me from the inside, because for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Zach wrapped his arms around my shoulders, his warmth instantly melting away the remnants of tension that had been gripping my muscles after this regular meeting with my family, and I allowed myself to exhale, realizing that it was over. "They're not coming back," he said calmly, stroking my back. "Even if they try," I shrugged, feeling like the confidence I had been looking for so long had finally become an integral part of me. "Now I know how to stop them." Zach chuckled, pulling me closer. "That's my girl." The next 3 months flew by in a blur, filled with the last preparations for the wedding, endless meetings with the organizers, dress fittings, cake tastings, and small worries that accompanied me at every step. My family hasn't stopped trying to make me look bad. They were still calling relatives, complaining to friends, and at one point even staged an absurd spectacle outside their church, holding a placard with the inscription, "Samantha Jenkins abandoned her pregnant sister." They are incredible. I shook my head when Maya sent me a photo from this strange rally. "But it's not your problem anymore," Zach reminded me, kissing the top of my head. And he was right. The wedding was magical. We chose a place on the shore of the lake. Sun-drenched hills, huge trees with lights hanging among them, the transparent surface of the water reflecting the evening sky. Everything I've ever dreamed of. I walked down the aisle feeling my heart racing, but not from fear, but from anticipation. Zach looked at me with such love, with such confidence, that I knew I was heading towards a life in which I would never have to doubt that I was important again. The moment we exchanged vows, when his fingers slid over my hand, putting on the ring, I realized that I had made the right choice. Maya, beaming with happiness, hugged me after the ceremony. "Your family is here," she whispered, pointing at the assembled guests. And she was right. A real family is not just the people your genes connect you to. These are the ones who stay close, no matter what. These are the ones who don't demand sacrifices from you, don't take advantage of you, but just love you. Zach hired security in case my mother and Mia tried to ruin our day, and his hunch didn't let him down. They really tried to show up, but the guards quickly took them out, not allowing them to destroy what I had built. And I wasn't even mad. I just didn't care about it anymore. The next morning, Zach and I went to the airport holding hands, and a few hours later we were standing on the sun-drenched beaches of Hawaii, enjoying the first chapter of our new life. 2 weeks full of carefree happiness, white sand, nights under the starry sky, a warm ocean in which we laughed, splashing like children, and moments when I looked at him and realized, I'm at home. Months later, Emily wrote to me that Mia had given birth to a baby boy, that my parents had taken full care of him and were now endlessly complaining about financial difficulties, complaining about my callousness. And I realized that I no longer feel anything. No guilt, no resentment, no anger, because I chose myself. I built a life where I was loved, respected, and appreciated. I found happiness, and most importantly, I was finally truly free.